Okay, thanks. So I'm Nigel and work at a company called Encore. We do business data analytics type of stuff. Um, so what I was going to talk about was I've used Docker sort of for side projects for the last year or so, and have just got a nice shiny new laptop and decided to just go over to Docker as much as I could. We've changed over at work to Docker in our stack. Um, because not really sort of thinking about being at the technical edge of things. What I'm just thinking about in terms of probably on a day-to-day basis, quite often we are on that precipice. Last month, when we talked about security, hopefully everyone went away really paranoid about who was breaking into their systems. What I mean by this is, what happens tomorrow if I go into work and my hard disk decides to spontaneously combust? What happens because we use R for machine learning and data analytics? I know over the next couple of weeks that will be coming into our dev stack. So, well, and also actually like lots of other people, we're looking for new developers as well. So when a new developer comes on board, we want to make that process as smooth as possible for them so they can just get going writing code and not be having to tangle up trying to work out why their machine isn't working. So what I was trying to do was just think, okay, so we've got with, say, if you took a photo on your camera now, on your phone now, it's going to be backed up into something like iCloud or Dropbox or somewhere or other. We've got to talk later on about Gits, and hopefully we all know that whatever we've stored and put into Git, we've pushed up to somewhere like GitHub or Bitbucket or somewhere. So we get very precious though about our dev environments. I mean, say I swapped over to a new laptop and then it's suddenly thinking, oh my God, I got everything set up. I'm able to go in, probably for about 2 weeks I was going to work with 2 laptops just in case. So yeah, trying to find an easier way, basically by saying actually everything can go wrong. So I want to be able to replace things and have things set up very quickly, very easily as we can. So just quickly going through probably what previously did. One, this was quite strange. If you got a new Mac running Sierra OS and you try and install Twig version 2, it will tell you to go away because your shiny new Mac is actually running on 5.6. And I've got no idea anymore. I don't really care. How do I upgrade PHP on my Mac? That would be kind of one thing I just want to get out of the way. So not looking at the local environment. Also with development, there is a bit of a bleed, a bit of a blur between what you're doing within your dev stack and what you might have on your local machine. So say things like gulp tasks. On my old machine, I had Node.js running. I have no idea how on earth I got it on there, let alone, I mean, I know I could find out what version it was, but how was I going to upgrade it? What did I need to do? All those just pain. So obviously lots of us have been using virtual machines for some time. And what I found though is it's slightly dualistic. Either you're in the sort of snowflake territory in that you set up your VirtualBox on your own machine. It's all up and running because somebody's given you some code to get running. When I started Encore just over a year ago, it was then, but you've got to have this to do your bash settings for this particular thing. You've got to make sure you download this and put this in. And so, that's when I was starting up with my new laptop. Where the hell were all those things? It's also difficult then if you're working within a team. So whatever I've got on my running locally and mine's working fine, how do I talk to another developer who, their machine's suddenly going all wrong? I don't know quite whether they've gone in and fiddled it a bit, or else have I gone in and fiddled things to make it all work? How do I remember? Even we use Chef with VirtualBox to set up our own local environments. And just before Christmas, because we have Phantom.js as part of our dev stack, we needed to upgrade that on a local machine. And there's no way I was going to go back into Chef and try and work out how the hell I went from 1.97 to 2.11, where the files were, get everything sorted out. That was too much pain. I was working with a junior dev who was at that stage was running on Docker was running Docker on his Mac, and it was just a question of going into the Docker file, changing an environment variable to say rather than say 1.97, it was 2.11, Docker Compose down, Docker Compose build, Docker Compose up. Who's in business? The alternative, having worked somewhere else in the past, where the ops team tried to sort out this whole problem with people having their own Snowflake virtual machine set up on their computer, was to have it all centralized, which I can understand from a support point of view. That was great, but that was just a complete pain because at one stage, somebody was looking at Xdebug and was trying to show everybody else how you could use Xdebug, except because that was in the PHP ini files and they were using Puppet, as soon as you started trying to add that into your ini file, probably about half an hour later, it would just get wiped. So unless we got everybody to come along and sort of hear Tom's talk a couple of months ago about Xdebug and how wonderful it was, and everyone say, "Yay, this is really great," trying to motivate people to say, let's try it, trying to get it onto the ops team's list of priorities, and not knowing whether or not it was going to work. So you just have that real, it's centralized, it's great, no Snowflake, but you're just locked in, and this idea that we just have to keep moving so fast in terms of what we're doing in terms of our dev. And the other thing I'd found over the years, trying different ways of linking my dev environment, my dev IDE, into something like Vagrant, VirtualBox. I started off using remote mount disk, which was great. I could do things, get bored with little ._ files it would create and just ignore those. The main problem was if I was trying to make use of a local Git client, and quite often they would use SourceTree as a system, just to be able to see what was going on in terms of the commits over the last 24 hours, who was doing what. Git doesn't play ball with that. It hates the idea of remote mount because it has to do so much work and so much traffic going up and down. So you go to NFS share, you've got lots of file permissions if you try to upload files. Is it the same user? I tried to use IDE upload in PHPStorm, which again was great because as soon as you save it, it goes up onto your virtual machine into its own internal hard disk. But then when you do a git pull, you have to then say, oh yeah, I've got to remember because I've got all those files now sitting on my local hard disk. They haven't been pushed into my VirtualBox, or if you've got any sort of gulp task running, something like that, it won't automatically upload. And recently before I was saying I used to use VirtualBox at Encore before Christmas, and I just, it was using rsync, so you hit save, count 1, 2, 3, reload, and hope that you got it timed right, because otherwise you never knew whether something hadn't worked because you just got your timing wrong or because you made a mistake. So for all those sort of reasons, different reasons, moved to Docker. And obviously as well, it's got a really nice logo. So that's also a bonus, really. Making the change over, some of the things you suddenly have to think about. So running our dev stack, dead easy. In fact, this afternoon with a junior dev, we just rebuilt his dev stack again because we were sort of changing around how we're doing things like subsites and where we're putting different files. No problem, it just went through. So just quickly go through some of the things I've found. So one of the ways, say if you want to run Composer, is you can actually use the docker run command. You've got the Composer image that's available on Docker Hub, and that works. But basically, all I'm trying to do is Composer install, and basically, I've switched off by the first. Maybe that -v. There's lots of other punctuation and sort of odd letters after that. And I'm completely bored. But it's a way of running things. I've run it similarly to this with things like Jekyll. Again, just run it. Don't care what version of Ruby or anything else I've got running on my local machine or what version I need for a particular project. It's just so easy to do. The only thing that I've found is, say if you've tried to run a gulp using a gulp image, it's a question of where they give you access to. Somewhere in your code base, you'll have your source for your gulp, and you want to kind of push it down into your public web somewhere else. And usually you're going to have to sort of be somewhere up here to be able to see both of them, and you can end up with sort of in your gulp task, you end up with lots of dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot slash to go all the way up and all the way down, or putting an absolute path in. So sometimes it might be better to actually write your own Docker image, because then you can just say, here's my image, I've got my source directory here, I've got my distribution directory here, and I'm just going to put in somewhere in my Docker Composer, say, pull in that directory over here, pull it into here, pull in my distribution from here into here, and it's all as far as that particular image is concerned, it's just side by side. So that's one way of doing it. You can get around that by creating a shell script. So basically all this is doing is just bunging it into a shell script, sticking whatever argument I've put at the end. So if I called this composer and put it into my path somewhere, I could then say composer install, and it would just stick the install at the end, or composer require twig/twig, all those sort of things. But my hesitation about doing that is it's just back to Snowflake again, because somewhere or other I would be sticking my shell scripts would have to go in, and I'd have to make sure I've got the right the right permissions on it. Is it executable or not? So it's there. It's a pain. What I've come to do though is do this, which is something of a halfway house, because essentially you're just getting this Docker exec. I'm just getting onto this PHP container that's running. I'm running bash, and from there on in, I can do everything I like, really. But I must admit, I've found this the easier way, because I can set up things like my composer. I can set up everything else. I say we use shell scripts to pull down databases and other content. I can get it all set up, and that's what we set up this afternoon with the junior dev, and goes off to the races without having to bother about sticking files here, there, and everywhere. So that's the way I've done. And obviously, because we're not running Docker in production at the moment, if you are adding other things in, you wouldn't want, for dev purposes, you wouldn't want to put that into a container that would actually, a container configuration that would actually go out into production. You'd want to have that as a separate container just for dev. The other great thing I've found is in PHPStorm. It has a Docker setting when you try and set up your remote interpreter. So it just says, okay, so you're running Docker, I can spot this is the name of your container. I'll take the latest one, and then if I'm running something like PHP unit, I just say, okay, so use that particular remote PHP. Again, this stuff all gets sorted out in the wash, and I've got my default configuration file. So from within PHPStorm, I can still run my PHP unit tests without moving away from that at all. And it'll come back and do the code coverage and everything, and it's running in the right version of PHP that I want. And one of the things I'm looking at doing is putting that into more things. So probably with Composer, looking at trying to get that integrated here as well. So it matches and fits in as much as possible. Quick run through of issues we found. I think we sort of partly mentioned this one with Tom's talk. If you're using Docker for Mac, it's supposed to be run as if it was native and as if it was local. So you'll find that you use the normal loopback address to be able to access your website. So if you've set up ports for MySQL, you'd use that. But if you try and set up Xdebug, then certainly things get confused, because you try and set up, basically you've got a virtual machine and it's all hidden away from you. So inside that virtual machine, if you refer to 127.0.0.1 as local, outside of your container, then your client, in my case PHPStorm, says, what the hell are you talking about? That's not local, I can't see it. So we put these slides up, but this is the way to do it, is you just create an alias, and there's 10.24, 254, 254. 254 is what people suggest. It can be kind of any IP address that isn't, is a private IP. They just gone for the far end of the 10 range, and that just works like a dream. One of the things, again, just because your Docker config is sitting within your code repository, and it's the code repository that will go up onto production. Quite often found we're just not used to the idea of what to do about particular secrets. I'm sure Andy will be the person to talk about in terms of what do you do about secrets in Docker and production. Put them on the wall, okay. And I was going to whisper them quietly. But in this case, obviously they're not, because you're just sort of, we had this recently, don't know whether you've noticed it, but Chrome's changed in terms of how it looks at SSL certificates when you're doing local dev. There's particular things it's put in. And it's then, well, should we put the certificate into our repo or not? We all need it to run our Docker config, but should it be there or not? What's it mean? So some of those things, if you were in the past, you had your separate Vagrant repo, then that's kind of, you still have the same questions, and should it go up into GitHub? But if you suddenly thought, oh my God, that was a bad idea, it's quite easy to go into your dev stack and just wipe that repo out and start again. It's a lot harder if it's your production code, which has got linked in with lots of CI tools and lots of things. It'll be a lot of pain. So that keeping secrets is just something you're not used to, and it's important to think about. Again, one of the things that's slightly hidden is having Docker images, because unlike a virtual machine, you can't just say, oh, here's my virtual machines folder. Let's see how big that is. It's kind of hidden off out of sight. So I just found I've got 20 gig sitting around, which is fine. I'm not really too worried about that. But one of the good things is to solve that problem is just wipe your images, all of them. And that's a good thing to do in terms of Docker, and really a good thing to do in terms of development, because you're making sure that you've got the latest version of whatever it is you're using, PHP, MySQL. You've got you don't have to think about updates or anything like that. Everybody should be running on the same thing if you just do a complete wipe. And the last thing, I'll then shut up, is that there is an issue on Macs with Docker for Mac about file scanning, because it is a virtual machine. Usually it happens with things like, say, something like Gulp Watch, where it's having to go through lots of files. It's something they're aware of. I think the last time I saw anything about on this roadmap that they have, I think the next version of Docker they're testing out is being set up to try and solve some of these things. And that's also a bonus of using Docker for Mac, is that it will just update like any other normal app. It's not really native, but it'll just update and continue to update. And again, you know that everybody else in your team is up to date, rather than using the Docker machine and all that confusion. And given those issues, I'm still much happier. It's a lot less pain. So thoroughly recommend it. Thoroughly recommend people going to the PHP training to sit down. Sorry, am I 24th? Probably, yeah. But yeah, any questions? I think I'm probably out of time, am I? Which will put and pay to any questions. How many weeks of pain? I think the most pain is just making sure that you're connected into the same config, same versions as your production system. It's a lot easier than, say, I found Puppet's very strange in that you just say, I want these different things running, and suddenly finding, because I had my PHP was installed before Nginx, that PHP thought, oh yeah, actually you want a web server, I'll give you Apache. And I was thinking, but nobody asked me. Whereas a lot of the Docker files I've seen just tend to be just a whole string of commands, install this, install that, change this, change that. I'd say it took us some time to do that, and we did go through a bit of pain where, again, you're used to, say, something with like Vagrant, you're not used to updating things all the time. So it's easy suddenly to find that if you don't specify the particular version of a package that you want to use, that next time you run Docker Compose up, you've got a completely new one, and it's not what you intended to happen. So I'd say that it's probably similar to using Composer in that you just get used to saying, this is the version I want. I'm happy for you to give me a minor release out of that, but actually don't do a major update. And probably that XD bug was probably, that was the thing that we found the hardest, and that's just to do with Docker for Mac, which is, I think it was only last July it came out. But as I say, yes, I mean today we just trashed somebody's dev environment and rebuilt it, and it was all happy, really. Any more?
What was the answer to his question? How long did it take?
How long did it take? Oh God, sorry. Yeah.
Because a junior dev trained properly should only take a couple of hours.
Yeah. It only take a couple of hours
manually.
to actually do the first setup. You mean getting your Docker files to compose?
No, I mean without Docker.
Without.
Just create a virtual environment. Install PHP, PHP, MySQL, Composer, a couple of hours, and get Docker can sometimes take weeks and weeks of time to tweak it and get it right and let them work and you feel in there. But how many junior devs do you have to?
How many junior devs? Well,
You get a return on investment.
I don't. You see, I think even with senior devs, I think one of the problems with senior devs is that you think, I'll try this. I'll just write this little shell script and do this over here, and that's just not shared within the team. I think that's one of the main things for us on that is that we know that it's, and we had that with our Vagrant stack that, say I joined last year, there were 2 other people there. One of them wouldn't touch their Vagrant stack at all, wouldn't even run the same one as me because they had everything working and they just, no way we were going to go anywhere near things. To be honest, we haven't found too many problems. After the first hurdle of getting it set up, which might have been probably a week of somebody's time, really. And again, it depends on. I don't know. In some ways, again, it would be something like Andy who maybe be able to answer slightly better, but because we're trying to, you're looking up to see how long it took. Because we're trying to replicate a non-Docker environment in production, that takes some extra effort. Possibly, well, possibly not. So, because underneath our system we have Drupal, and we're having to use the multi-site version of Drupal to try and keep things separate. Ideally, when we get onto running Docker in production or something like that, then we're going to have each of the separate sites running in their own container. And so one of the issues we found, actually one of the issues that I found, I hadn't jumped to Docker for Mac for some time, is because somebody was trying to work out how do I have a DNS running inside Docker to make sure, how do you do the discovery of be able to start up new services? Yeah, that's probably we were trying to. I think they were trying to avoid using an orchestration tool. But Docker Swarm again, I don't know how good that is. We'll do all that. But even going back to the thing about running Docker in production, we could just still refer to things as this is the database for this web, and just use those terms and just know that within that sort of PHP Southwest.uk group, it knows that relationship. And if you have a separate, Bristol DevOps.uk sitting over here, again, you can just use the same names. What we were trying to do was stick everything into the same containers and. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think that was the main pain point, and it worked on Docker machine. It didn't work on Docker for Mac, and that took a few months just to find space to sit down and say, sorry, I'll just try and work out what the hell's going on here. Okay. Thank you.